On May 12, 1989, a Trona Hopper train was being operated through Cajon Pass. This train had 5 engines, 3 leaders and 2 helpers. Leading was Southern Pacific 7551, an SD-45R, and the first locomotive on the Southern Pacific to sport the Kodachrome livery. Behind was another SD-45R 7549. Behind 7549 was Southern Pacific 9340 and SD-40T-2. On the helper end was SD-40T-2 8317 and SD-45R 7443. They were attached to the train, not knowing what any of the tonnage, and all they knew is that they were going to help this train go up and down the grade. However, Southern Pacific 7551 was found to be dead in tow and would not start, and so another engine was pulled from the yard, which was SD-40T-2 8278. It was attached to the front end of the train, and being perfectly functional, was ready to start the train. Behind the lead engines and in front of the helpers were 69 Southern Pacific Trona hoppers. They were carrying loads of Trona, and they were about to send this up the grade and through the grade. However, on the way, something bad would happen. On board were 5 crew members, 3 on the head end and 2 on the helper end. In 8278, engineer and conductor, 7549, brakeman, and 7443 in the helper crew. They were reading their tonnage, but they did not know that their tonnage was off and was miscalculated. And now, their speedometer was noticed to be creeping up. So they decided, let's just hit the brakes because we can keep a speed like this and control our train down the grade. However, this did not happen, as little force was visually and apparently applied as they tried harder and harder and more and less, and to lock on the brakes more. The train only kept speeding up, speeding and speeding. Now their train was running, and one of the brakemen in the helper hit the emergency brakes, but while hitting the emergency brakes disabled the dynamic brakes, and so now it just caused the train to surge forward. Now that train was hitting 90 miles an hour, and that's the farthest the speedometer can go because that's how much the trains were built for. But obviously the train only kept getting faster and faster it went. It was calculated that it was going up to 110 miles per hour. The wheels, which were smoking from the brakes being applied, were literally getting deformed and turning into molten steel. And then the engineer conductor, to their horror, remembered that there is a curve with houses lined on Duffy Street. And they could only hope that there was a miracle that they would make it to the curve. And that miracle never happened. The train comes off the tracks at such speed that it sends the entire train off the tracks. 8278 and 7551 lands sideways, but 7551 has only its underbelly remaining, while 8278 remains relatively intact. 7549 was thrown into the ground and buried, and while 9340 landed on its side, half intact because of the hoppers landing on its long hood. The helpers survived the impact, however, sustaining little damage due to derailing and hitting some of the hoppers. As the engineer crawls out of his lead engine, he finds out that his conductor, who was sitting right next to him, was killed, along with the brakeman who was sitting in 7549. He faced certain death, and he probably died on impact due to 7549 being thrown upside down and into the ground. The helper crew also survived the impact, with only minor injuries. However, other people, including 2 children, were killed on the impact when they were killed by flying freight cars that hit houses and the ground. During cleanup, days after, one fatal mistake was made. A pipeline had ran right under the wreck. Although the wreck did not touch it, someone else did. One of the cleanup crew was tampering, and then he hit the pipeline, which caused a spark, and that spark quickly turned into a disaster. People in their houses were starting to hear some raining sounds. However, it was a perfectly clear day. Everyone was confused, but most of the people who heard it got their answers. The pipeline spews gasoline, and as soon as the spark happened, it lit the gasoline on fire, and with all the combination of that gasoline caused an inferno. It was fought all day, and in the midst of it, 2 more people were burned alive. In total, 6 people were killed and 7 were injured. All the locomotives on the head end, Southern Pacific 8278, 7551, 7549, and 9340, were all scrapped, along with all 69 100-ton hopper cars. This incident was one of the few reasons why Southern Pacific had fallen. Since the failed SPSF merger, which was the reason that 7551 had the Kodachrome livery and why 7443 also had the Kodachrome livery at some point in its time, it just costed so much money, and Southern Pacific was not prepared. With this and rivalries like BN and UP, they were forced with Rio Grande to merge with Union Pacific to keep surviving. 8317 was sold to multiple leasing companies and was eventually scrapped in 2013. 7443 was eventually sold by Union Pacific, and MRSL took it and renumbered it as 5313-1 and was reclassified as an SD40-3M. Now everyone is asking, and the big question is, why did this happen? This was because of the locomotives. 8278, which was attached to the train late, was fully functioning and working. 7551, however, was dead in tow, as mentioned earlier, and was the reason why Southern Pacific 8278 was detached in front of it. 7549 had traction current but had no dynamic brake current, which means it can't function its brakes correctly. 9340 had weak brakes, and 8317, just like 7549, had traction current but no dynamic brake current. 7443 was the second and final locomotive to be fully functioning. That meant only 2 out of the 6 locomotives and a 69 rolling stock were operational. That meant this train was doomed to run away and cause this disaster the minute it was put together.